Story 1. Abandoned Cinema. The Legend of Cinema 13. In a small coastal town, there stood an old cinema that had been abandoned for over 20 years. It was called Cinema 13, not just because of its number, but because of the chilling stories surrounding the strange occurrences that had taken place there. Once, the cinema had been a thriving hub, drawing hundreds of moviegoers each night. However, one horrific event changed everything. On a particular evening, while screening a classic horror film, an unexpected fire broke out in screening room 3. It was said that over 30 people perished in the flames, including the cinema's owner, Mr. Adams, the only man with a key to the control room. No one ever found out the true cause of the fire, but rumors spread that moments before the fire erupted, a girl in a white dress had been spotted standing motionless in the middle of the theater. After the tragedy, Cinema 13 was permanently shut down. Yet, residents nearby continued to hear eerie noises emanating from inside at night. The creaking of seats, murmurs as if an audience were watching a film, and sometimes spine-chilling screams piercing through the darkness. The curious explorers and their mysterious disappearance. Despite the cinema being abandoned, thrill-seekers still dared to venture inside to test their courage. A group of university students, Jack, Michael, Emma, and David, decided to explore Cinema 13 on a stormy night. They brought flashlights, cameras, and audio equipment to document any supernatural occurrences. The moment they stepped inside, a chilling air enveloped them. Dust covered the floors, and the once grand, velvet seats were now tattered and decayed. The massive movie screen hung precariously, as though someone had tried to rip it down. Jack turned on his camera, but the screen was filled with strange interference. They made their way to screening room 3, the site of the infamous fire. Suddenly, Emma's flashlight flickered. A static hum crackled from the old speakers mounted on the ceiling. Then, without warning, the movie screen lit up, though none of them had touched the controls. A black and white film began playing, depicting a girl in a white dress standing alone in the theater, her pale face devoid of emotion, her hollow eyes staring straight ahead. Emma gasped in terror as she realized the girl in the film was also standing at the back of the theater. Her ghostly figure drifted toward them, her long hair covering her face, her footsteps echoing eerily through the room. Michael bolted for the exit, but the theater doors had somehow been locked. The lights shut off, plunging the space into complete darkness. In the pitch-black silence, only panicked breathing, hurried footsteps, and a chilling giggle echoed through the room. A terrifying truth. The next morning, police found 3 scattered video cameras at the entrance of Cinema 13, but the 4 students were nowhere to be found. When authorities reviewed the footage, they saw the group frantically trying to escape. Then, a pale hand emerged from the movie screen, pulling each of them inside. The last frame captured a blank screen, with the distorted silhouettes of 4 people writhing within, as if they had been trapped in another realm. Unsolved mysteries. After that night, Cinema 13 was permanently sealed. Authorities forbade anyone from entering, yet urban legends persisted. Some passers-by claimed to see flickering lights through the theater's broken windows at midnight. Others reported hearing whispers from within, as though an unseen audience was watching a film. It is said that on the anniversary of the fire, if one stands near the entrance, they can hear faint footsteps on the wooden floors and the faint static crackle of a film projector running. Since then, no one has dared to step foot into Cinema 13. The stories continue to circulate, and on some nights, if one peers from a distance, they might see the ghostly figure of a girl in a white dress, slowly approaching the entrance, waiting for someone to join her in a film that never ends. Story 2. The Haunted Movie Theater. In the heart of a bustling city, where neon lights illuminated streets that never slept, There once stood a famous movie theater called Eclipse, but few knew that this theater was built atop an ancient cemetery, a burial ground that had existed for centuries. The nameless graves and restless spirits buried beneath its foundations were never given proper rites, their peace disturbed in the name of entertainment. The Nightmare Premiere Night. In 1998, Eclipse held its grand opening, featuring the premiere screening of a horror movie titled The Ghost in the Mirror. Hundreds of eager moviegoers lined up, excited for a thrilling experience, unaware that they were about to step into a real-life nightmare. The movie began, its images flickering on the massive screen. But as the protagonist gazed into the mirror, the screen suddenly distorted. A ghastly pale face with hollow, blackened eyes and an unnaturally wide mouth appeared. At first, the audience assumed it was a special effect, until, without warning, the entire theater was plunged into darkness. A suffocating silence filled the room. Then, faint whispers slithered through the air like icy fingers crawling down the spine. Some people felt their hearts pounding, struggling to breathe. When the staff finally managed to restore power, the crowd gasped in horror. An entire row of seats at the back of the theater was empty. 13 people had vanished without a trace. Authorities launched an investigation, but no evidence suggested the missing guests had ever left the theater. Security footage showed them sitting in their seats, watching the film, and then a sudden flicker of darkness and they were gone. Seat number 13. Following the terrifying opening night, Eclipse continued to operate, but rumors spread like wildfire. The most chilling tale revolved around seat number 13, a cursed seat that no one dared to occupy. Those who sat there described an unsettling chill creeping down their spine, an unshakable feeling of being watched. Some even claimed to hear a voice whispering in their ear, "This seat is not yours. Give it back." Others reported seeing a shadowy figure seated beside them, only to turn and find the seat empty. One evening, a security camera captured a woman with long, dark hair sitting in seat 13. But when employees checked the theater, the seat was vacant. The faceless man. One by one, employees quit their jobs, unable to endure the eerie occurrences. A projectionist recalled shutting off the movie screen late at night, only to see a reflection of a man in an old-fashioned suit standing in the aisle. But his face was completely blank. Those who made the mistake of staring at him experienced splitting headaches, nausea, or even violent seizures. One janitor, working late, felt an unseen force yank her backward. When she turned, she saw a pale hand gripping a seat. But as she screamed, it vanished into thin air. The weeping in the theater. One fateful night, a group of college students attended a late screening. As the film reached its quietest scene, a soft, mournful sobbing filled the air. At first, they assumed it was a lost child, but the sobbing grew louder, mixed with a low, agonizing moan. One girl turned to glance at the back row and froze. Sitting in the darkness was a woman in a white dress, her long hair cascading over her face, her shoulders trembling as she cried. The girl shrieked, and the group bolted out of the theater, abandoning their half-watched movie. No one ever dared to attend a midnight screening at Eclipse again. The curse of the graveyard. As the hauntings escalated, paranormal investigators researched the land's history and uncovered a chilling truth. Eclipse had been built over an old war-era graveyard. In their greed, the theater's owners had bulldozed over the graves without performing a single ritual to lay the spirits to rest. Now, the disturbed souls roamed the theater, turning it into a cinematic nightmare. After yet another group of guests mysteriously disappeared during a midnight screening, Eclipse was forced to shut down indefinitely. The building stood abandoned, its windows covered in dust, its faded sign peeling away. Yet, Those living nearby still swore they could hear the flickering hum of a film projector at night, despite the theater being powerless. Some brave souls snuck into the abandoned cinema, but none spoke of what they saw. The faint glow of the projector still flickered. Laughter echoed from empty seats, and through the dust-covered glass doors shadowy figures could be seen, sitting in silence, waiting for a movie that would never end. Story 3. The Cursed Cinema, a theater built on graves. On the outskirts of a bustling city, shrouded in mystery and urban legends, stood an abandoned movie theater known as the Avalon Cinema. It was once a popular entertainment hub, but now it loomed in eerie silence, its neon lights long extinguished. Few dared to go near it. Those who did spoke of strange whispers, shadowy figures lurking in the empty halls, and an overwhelming sense of dread that pressed down on them like unseen hands. What many didn't know, or perhaps refused to believe, was that the Avalon Cinema was built upon an ancient burial ground. Centuries ago, the land had been a mass grave for plague victims, their bodies buried in haste, nameless and forgotten. When construction for the theater began in the late 1950s, workers uncovered hundreds of skeletons. But rather than stopping, the developers simply pushed the bones aside and built over them. From the moment the first film was screened, the Avalon Cinema was doomed. The night of the first incident, the first recorded tragedy, occurred on November 17, 1961, during the midnight screening of a horror movie titled The Silent Ones. The audience had settled in, the smell of buttered popcorn filling the air. The film played smoothly for the first hour, but then the screen glitched. The image blurred, warped, and then the film stopped altogether. A black screen loomed over the audience, and in the dead silence that followed, a piercing scream echoed from the back rows. The lights flickered on Now Woman was gone. Her seat was soaked in fresh blood, but her body was never found. Security footage from that night revealed something chilling. She never left. In one frame, she was sitting in her seat. In the next, she simply wasn't there anymore. But what haunted investigators most was the final frame. The camera had captured a tall, shadowy figure standing behind her just before she vanished. Its elongated fingers stretched toward her, and its face was a gaping void. Seat 42. The cursed seat. After the first incident, Seat 42 gained a terrifying reputation. Anyone who sat there claimed they felt something breathing down their necks. Others reported feeling an ice-cold hand gripping their shoulders. Some even swore they heard faint whispers in an unknown language. One man, a skeptic, deliberately sat in Seat 42 during a horror marathon, laughing at the rumors. By the time the credits rolled, he was dead, his face frozen in a silent scream, his body ice-cold, his eyes black and hollow, as if something had sucked his soul away. No cause of death was ever determined. The girl in the projection room. As years passed, employees of the Avalon Cinema reported eerie occurrences that made working there unbearable. But the most feared entity was the girl in the projection room. She was first spotted by a janitor named Michael in 1974. While cleaning late at night, he heard a faint giggle coming from the projection booth. Thinking it was a prank, he climbed the stairs to check. The room was empty, except for an old film reel that had been sitting untouched for years. Just as he turned to leave, the reel began playing on its own. The images on the screen were not from any known movie. Instead, it was grainy black and white footage of a young girl standing in a field, staring blankly at the camera. Then, she tilted her head and smiled. The screen flickered, and suddenly, the girl was in the projection room, standing right behind Michael. He was found the next morning, curled in a fetal position, muttering nonsense. His hair turned completely white. He never spoke again. After that night, the projection room was sealed shut. The final show, the night everyone disappeared. By the early 1990s, the Avalon Cinema was struggling. Fewer people came, rumors of hauntings kept customers away, and staff members quit without notice. Desperate, the owner, Richard Lanson, decided to host a final grand event, a Halloween midnight horror festival. The theater was packed for the first time in years. Over 150 people filled the seats, excited for a night of terror. But they had no idea they would never leave. At exactly midnight, the first film began playing. It was an obscure black and white film that no one remembered selecting. The screen flickered violently. The speakers emitted an ear-piercing static, and suddenly, the audience began screaming. Something crawled out of the screen, a figure tall and grotesque, with elongated limbs and a mouth stretched too wide. Its face was blurred, constantly shifting as if struggling to take form. The emergency exits wouldn't open. The theater manager, watching from the lobby, heard the chaos and ran to unlock the doors only to find the theater was empty. Every single person gone. The seats still held the imprint of bodies, the popcorn still warm, but there was no one there. The police found no traces of struggle, no bodies, no explanation. The only evidence left behind was a film reel, still spinning in the projector. When authorities played it back, they saw the missing audience. They were sitting in the theater, staring at the screen, but their eyes were hollow and lifeless. And then, one by one, they all turned to look directly at the camera, as if they knew they were being watched. The abandoned theater, a warning. After that night, the Avalon Cinema was permanently shut down. No buyers would take the cursed land. Attempts to demolish it failed. Workers reported seeing faces staring at them from the shattered windows, hearing voices calling their names. Still stands to this day, untouched, rotting away. But sometimes, on stormy nights, the old marquee lights flicker on. And if you get close enough, you can hear it. The sound of a movie playing. If you look through the broken doors, you'll see the missing audience, still sitting in their seats, staring at the screen, waiting for the next guest to join them.